I've spent over a decade working in the film industry, and one of the things that I've learned is that QLabels are used in basically every PyQt application I ever write. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you the 3 main things you need to know about working with QLabels. And then please stick around to the end because I'm going to be covering one thing you might not know about QLabels that is really useful and really cool. There are chapter markers down in the description so you can skip around as you want, as well as links to all the code that I write, as well as an article that summarizes everything that I talk about in this video. So go check it out if you want to see it. So what are QLabels? QLabels are generally text that you add to your user interface. And so they generally are the things that label the parts of the interface and give information to the user. But now, let's get to the code. One quick thing before we get started, I'm working in a virtual environment. They're super useful for keeping your software environment super clean and you always knowing what's in there. So if you haven't worked with virtual environments before, please see my tutorial on how to use them. It's linked up above as well as down in the description. Now, actually, to the code. We're starting off with some template code that I use for most of my projects, so let's quickly get into it. I've got some imports up here at the top, and then down here I have a main function. This main function just creates an application and a main window. This is my custom main window class that we're going to talk about in a moment. Then we're going to show the window and execute the application, and down here we run the main. Here is my custom main window class. It inherits from QMainWindow and just allows us to override and do some work in its init method. So here we're just initializing the window and setting its title. So if we go ahead and run the code, it's main.py. You can see here that we have a window that just has a title of my QLabel window. The first thing you're going to want to do when working with QLabels is to create one. So let's do that. So let's start by importing QLabel so we can use it. And then we're going to do self.label is equal to QLabel, and we'll initialize it with the text, "This is my label." Now that we've created the label, we're going to set it as the central widget so it is shown. So we're going to do self.set central widget, and we're going to do self.label. There we go. So that's all we have to do to create a label, set its text, and add it to the window. So let's run it. We're going to run python main.py again, and as you can see here, we have our label. So that was the first thing we needed to learn, creating QLabels and adding them to the window. But let's get on to the second thing that you need to learn, and that second thing is setting the text of a QLabel. It's really common for you to want to update the text of a QLabel after some interaction with the user. So here we already have a line that creates the label. And if we wanted to change the text later, all we would have to do is self.label.setText. And I'm going to update the text to say, "This is updated text." And let's run it. So we've run python main.py again. You can see here that we get the updated text. This says, "This is updated text." So that's how you would update the text. So whenever you want to update the text, all you have to do is use the QLabels setText method, and then just pass it whatever the text you want it to set. Okay, so we've created QLabels, and we have updated the text of a QLabel. What's next? Well, the third most common thing that you're going to want to do with a QLabel is to style it. So let's do some styling. Let's start by changing the font. So let's first figure out what fonts we have available to actually change to. So I'm going to start out by importing some things that we're going to need to be able to do that. So we are going to do from PyQt5 dot Qt GUI import QFont database. So QFont database allows us to get a list of all of the fonts that we have available to Qt. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to print out all of the fonts that we have so we can choose one. Let's do fonts is equal to QFont database dot families, and let's print the fonts and run it. So, I mean, this just gets a list of all of the fonts available, and then so that comes out as a list, and then we're just going to be printing that list. So if we print that list, we get a ton here. And so let's pick a font. Ooh, I saw Papyrus. So why don't we set the font of the label to be Papyrus? So we're going to need QFont, so we're going to import that. And now that we've printed out the fonts, we don't need this anymore. I'm just going to comment it out and leave it there. And then what we're going to do is self.label.set font. And we're going to do QFont. We're going to give it what type of font family we want. And for us, it's going to be Papyrus. And just so that it's super visible, we're going to be changing the font size as well. And so I'm going to set it to 40. Let's run it. So if I clear my screen and then we run python main.py, you can see we have the updated text and it's in Papyrus and it's a lot larger. So this is one of the simplest ways you can go about styling your text, especially setting the font and setting the size of the font. But there's so much more that you can do with setting colors as well as the justification and everything. So if you want me to go more in details with how you can style your QLabels, then let me know down in the comments. I'm happy to make a specific tutorial for that. So we have created our QLabels, we have updated the text of our QLabels, and we've styled them. So what else can you do with QLabels? Well, the cool thing and the bonus that we're now getting to is that QLabels aren't just for text. You can actually use them for images, and they're honestly one of the most common ways to create images in your UI. So we're going to cover how to do that now. So let's get to creating a label with an image in it. Starting off, we're going to need to import something new. We're going to be importing QPixMap. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating a QPixMap that will load in the image. And as you can see over here, I already have an image in the directory that I'm working in. We're going to be using this cat.png to show in the label. So let's create the pixmap. So we're going to do pixmap is equal to QPixMap, and then we're going to give it cat.png. We're giving it only cat.png and not like the full directory path because this is being run from the place that the cat.png exists. So it's in the same directory. Including and distributing images with your PyQt applications can get a little bit complicated. So if you want me to cover that, please let me know down in the comments, and I'm happy to create a tutorial about it. But for now, we're just going to work with the expectation that when you run this application, you're going to be running it from the same directory that this cat image is in. And so once we've created the pixmap, all we have to do is self.label.set pixmap. And then we're going to give it the pixmap. And so if we go ahead and run it, you can see here we get a cute picture of a cat. And that's how you add an image to a label. So that's the basics of QLabels. Thank you for watching. If there's a topic that you would like me to cover, please put it down in the comments. I'm always interested in hearing of ideas. If you got value out of the video, please consider hitting the like button. If you want to hear more like it, please consider subscribing. And like all software made for movies, we test in production. Thank you, and I'll see you around.